Okay, you have me again for this next section. So about 2 months ago, Andrea, our head of, or technical director, and I got together and thought about what we could present that he would like to present today. And Andrea is really quite excited about what Microsoft's calling the telemetry that we can pull from the environments that Business Central and Bevica sit in. So we didn't come up with a really good title for it, but effectively what we're trying to show is the sort of information that's just kind of one layer behind the front of what everyone uses on Bevica. So that's in terms of what you can do to look at the data behind the scenes, possibly then to help support when you're querying things with support, like Ian said before, but also the more hardcore Microsoft telemetry that really gives us an insight into how you're using the software, which bits are good, which bits are bad. So that's generally what I'm going to try and show you today. The first bit, the sorts of things that you can do when you get into Bevica SaaS. And then the second bit is the sort of information that we get that we can share with you and show you how you're using the system, but also it helps us to map the future of the product in a better way. We can kind of categorize what we're doing given the information that we're getting. So this is what I'll be showing you today. So the first section, the role customization down to troubleshooting, is all the sorts of things that you can do in the software. So that's the demo bit where I'm going to be touching and tapping and show you stuff. And then the telemetry is the information we get from Microsoft that will really show you, while you're tapping away on the software, the sorts of things that are being triggered in the background that we can pull out and investigate. So I am going to just open up Bevica. And okay, so one of the new changes for this wave is the ability for you to add any field that's on a table to its own page. So in the past, if there was a field on, let's say, the customer record that you wanted added and you couldn't do it yourself, you had to ask us for development. There'd probably be a charge for that, and it would take a couple of weeks or a month or so. Now with the latest update, you can do that yourselves. So it's all managed from profiles. So you do this at a profile level, so everyone who's attached to a particular profile will be able to do this. So if I pick the business manager and customize pages, it opens up a new tab. And now everything I do on this tab is saved against that particular profile when it wakes up. There we go. So you'll see now it's in kind of designer mode. And if I go to a customer list, so open that. There we go. So this is just the standard customer list as if it was being personalized. And I add my fields on the side. So now this list here is every single field that's attached to the customer. So I'm going to pull across the chain name. So this is one that's not one that's traditionally on the customer list. So I'm going to bring it across, let go. And now everyone that logs on to this particular profile will see that field. Close that. Certainly. Done. So assuming that I've changed everything I want to do against that profile, I now close the tab and go back to my main tab. Okay, and then if I go to the customer list, I should have. Oh, I'm in the wrong role center. Hang on. Oh, I know what I did. Okay. So here, it's there in the background. If I now personalize and do fields, there we go. You can see chain name, so each individual can add it if they want to their own particular view. And they should be able to just drag it across, although I'm not sure why. Oh, there we go. So now that's from the profile point of view, it makes it available, and then each individual can add it to their screen if they want to. Something else that you'll notice that's, for those that are using this, that's different and new, is you have a few more options here. So at the moment, you can only see fields that have been designed for a particular page, whereas now it gives you more options to look at different types of fields. So if I untick fields from base object, which is the Microsoft customer list, now you can see that this list here are just fields that are extension-based rather than Microsoft-based. And if I hover over it, you'll see that this one, for example, is part of the Bevica Essentials extension. And in fact, I think all of these are added by Bevica Essentials. But if you had other extensions and clicking on this, you'd see that it's from this extension or that extension. So it starts to give you an idea of where the data sits and why it's there in the first place. And then, as ever, when you've finished designing it, you say done, and then that user, it saves that view for that user for the future. Okay, a few more other things that you can see. If I click in here, go back into settings and do my settings. So this is kind of a general area that most users will potentially every now and then go in just to change potentially the role center. You can change the company. People often quite often call support with the fact that their dates are the wrong way around and are American dates, or spelling might be American, and that's managed by these two fields here. So if you set these to UK, then everything will look normal as opposed to dates and spelling's the wrong way around. Then the notifications is an area that most people forget about. So you'll all have noticed that when you're placing a sales order, you get a stock out warning. You get a little bar at the top telling you that there's low stock, or you might be processing a purchase order and it tells you about the work date. This is where you can manage that, and then if any of those notifications are particularly annoying, you can come and switch them off, or you can switch them on. And some of them will let you add filters. So what I've done here is this is the stock out warning that appears on sales orders, but I've told the system I only want that stock out warning to appear for products that I've classified as distribution. So I might have fine wine, distribution, and the software will then only pop up those kind of error messages or messages on sales orders with these particular filters. And if I go down here, I search for work date. So work date reminder, that one particularly annoys me all the time. So if I untick that, then that's never going to appear anywhere that I'm working in the software. Teaching tips. So those are the little bars or little squares that appear at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, that if you're used to the software, you might have created a new company, that'll be switched on automatically. So you quite often go in there and switch it off, and they won't appear anymore and annoy or stop your flow as you go through the software. Okay, one area that really is kind of shows a lot more information behind the scenes is the troubleshooting area. So if I click on here and then do the help and support, and we get into this kind of troubleshooting area. And this is definitely where some of you that are more technically minded might be looking at this before calling support, just to get a better idea of what's happening in the software. So view last known error. If you ever get an error when you're posting something or you're processing an order or trying to create a product, I couldn't actually create any errors in the software. I know no one's going to believe that, but I couldn't get any errors to pop up. But they will appear there, and they will give you technical information that might be useful to send to support with that ticket that Ian was talking about, rather than just kind of a generic email. Inspect pages and data. So people on the older version will be very used to going into what's called the development environment and being able to look at almost an Excel spreadsheet of the customer table, the item table, or sales orders. And this is the SaaS version of that. So if you do page inspection and go to, for example, the item list, so that's my item list. Over the side here, again, a bit like the personalization, we get every single field with its value for the record that I'm on. So I can click on that one, and you'll see that the values here will change. Hovering over each of these will give you a bit of information. And from a technical point of view, this is something that our developers will be doing when they log on to your software. It can actually open up, if it's just gone to the other screen, it'll open up the actual code behind the scenes. So this is where our development guys work, and this is the actual code that runs Bevica and the software. So this is not something you'd have access to, but it does mean that when we log on to your software, it's even easier for our guys to pinpoint a problem from your email and then go in and see potentially where that code is coming from. So I'll close that. Like I said, so here we've got all the fields with a bit of information about what type of field it is, useful for data migration. If you're using configuration packages to bring data in, you can come here and have a look at what sort of field it is, what sort of information is expected, and what extension the data sits within. At the top here, table fields is the one we're looking at. Extensions tells you the number of extensions that are using this particular table. So earlier today I mentioned that kind of hierarchy of extensions that can sit within the software. So the item record, which admittedly is one of kind of the primary records in the software, is using quite a lot of different extensions. Some that we won't use, so Dynamics GP historical data is not one that anyone here has ever used or ever will need to use, but it's there nevertheless. So Shopify connector, that's the Bevica. Warehouse integration, Intrastat, they're all sitting there in the background just waiting to be used. And this is where you can see what bits are being managed by the software on any particular table. And then if I want to look at that table, like I said, from the old version, it would have been the object designer, as it was called. This is effectively an Excel spreadsheet of every record and every field on the item table. So I wouldn't expect anyone to come in here that often, but it can be useful sometimes just to have a look at the data. So if I scroll across, you'll see there are lots and lots of fields, most of which aren't interesting and they're not kind of part of your day-to-day operations, but nevertheless they can be seen here and you can check the data. You can't export this to Excel. I think that's deliberate from Microsoft to stop people just completely extracting the whole table, but you can use a configuration package, if you like, to do that and extract all the data. But it is sometimes a useful thing to have a look at from a kind of support and a technical point of view. Okay. Out of interest, has anyone ever gone into that? Does anyone use that? Okay. Right, let's go back into troubleshooting. Okay, analyze performance. So the telemetry that I mentioned before is kind of the hardcore what's happening to your environment that Microsoft provide. This one is more to kind of a user level, where if you think a page is really slow to open or some process is particularly painful, you can come in here and ask the software to just check how quick or not a particular process is. So I'm going to try it. And again, I can't get it to tell me anything's bad, but we'll see. So if I do settings, make it sensitive. So if I do, so the idea is that you start the profiler running, you then go back to the software, and I'm going to rerun the inventory price list, because that's a process I know that goes through a lot of operations in the software. So, actions. I'm going to populate it from scratch. Oops. B star. And then do OK. So that's running through just the standard process, but it's also logging what's happening, which operations it's running, which ones are taking longer, which ones are taking shorter. So that should have run. Good. And if I go to the back here, I can stop. Oh, it has come up with something. That's good. Okay, so it's telling me that Bevica Essentials took that long in that whole process, and the base application. And I like the fact that the answer that Microsoft give us to fix this is to remove the app. Classic Microsoft. Is there a problem? Just remove the app. Obviously, that's not the answer, especially if it's Bevica. So this might be an opportunity for you then to export this, so you can download this as kind of a package that you can then send to our support desk. Our support desk can run this themselves, and then they can see exactly what was happening when you ran this particular profiler, and the extra information that it's holding in the background. If I scroll down, it's giving me a bit more information about which bits of the software, which applications are actually running, and then the hardcore stuff down here. And that's the sort of thing that gets Andrea excited. Doesn't mean much to me, but you can see there, at least there, each line there is a process the software is going through. So these are all the things that was happening to create that inventory price list. And this will mean something, will mean a lot actually to a developer. They'll be able to follow that and understand the good, the bad, and the ugly as it's going through. So maybe something to think about if you're finding performance issues, have a chat with support, and then maybe they can talk you through running this and then giving them the results. Go back to Bevica. Okay, just a few more areas here on the software itself. Okay. Back to help and support. Attach debugger to this session. Again, that's something that our development guys would do. So that's if there's you found a bug, you've replicated it, like Ian was talking about earlier. They can come in here, set this up, attach the debugger, which is the code that we looked at before, click the button, and then they can see the code running as they're going through the processes. They don't need to divorce the two like they do at the moment. This kind of brings it all into the one place. And then the enable additional logging. So the telemetry that Microsoft keep tracking the background, that goes at a certain level. So everything you're doing is being tracked at a certain level by Microsoft. There might be occasions where we need you to switch this on, which does kind of an extra step. I think it says for about 15, 20 minutes, so that we can track even more of what's happening, and then we can pull that out of your environment and have a look. So that, again, from a support point of view, when you might have bugs or you might have something that's not quite right. So I won't switch that on. So those are some of the things that you can do from a kind of a semi-technical point of view in the software. Now, the telemetry is more of a technical thing, but I do want to just give you a flavor of how it works from the back end and the sorts of things that we can see that you are doing in the software. So that's quite interesting for a couple of reasons from our point of view, and I'll show you that. So let me close this. Go back to the presentation. Right. So telemetry via Power BI. So Power BI is the front end that we use to make the graphs and the charts. The telemetry is running in the background, always running from Microsoft. Everything you're doing in the software is being logged to some extent, and I'll explain what it does and doesn't do. And Microsoft split these things into kind of 4 areas. So the usage, errors, performance, and administration. I'll show you some of the graphs and information we get out of each of these. Unfortunately, Andrea was supposed to be showing this. He's not here today, so his penance for not being here and doing this is that he'll be doing a webinar on this in the next couple of months, whether he likes it or not. He doesn't know that yet. I will tell him when we get back to the office tomorrow. So how are we using it? So from my point of view as the product owner and the product team, we are really interested in seeing what features you're using in the software. So if we release, for example, Cellerage, or we release a new paid reserves process, we can see who's actually using that particular piece of functionality. So it helps us understand, is it good? Did we get it wrong and no one's using it because it's rubbish, or is it really popular? If there's a bug in that particular area of the software, we can immediately see who's using it, so we can tell them that there's a bug, we're fixing it, and then you can be prioritized in terms of when we release that particular bug fix, we can apply it to those particular people. So that's really quite interesting from my point of view, understanding how the software is being used. And then performance. Performance is always an issue. It's an ongoing thing that we like to understand. Account managers, if someone is talking to you, again, they like to see what pages you're looking at, how you're using the software. Support, customer services, they can see any errors that have cropped up. They can help with the troubleshooting and the admin, which we'll show you in a second. And then the dev team, they're probably most interested in the performance, because that's the area that the Bevica team are always pestering. Anything we want to develop, anything we want to design, it's their job to make sure that it performs properly and quickly and not slow everything down and unusable. So those are kind of the main areas. So the bit about what's actually being tracked and what's not being tracked. This is directly from the Microsoft website. So it is privacy compliant. We're not tracking individual user names. We're not tracking any of your business data. It's just about how you're using the software, kind of one level above that. And it's all anonymized at each environment level. So we can see a particular environment and how that's being used, or we can group everything together, which is the bit that I'm kind of interested in from a Bevica point of view, to see how everyone is using the software, which bits across everyone are the most popular or the least popular. And it also tracks the Business Central usage, so the standard software. It tracks the Bevica bit of the software, and it tracks any extensions that people have installed. So Shopify, for example, we can see how people are using Shopify. So going to the 4 areas, these are kind of the areas that the usage tracks. So the connectors, Shopify, for example, deprecated features, that would be the sales prices that we talked about earlier. And then going into how that's displayed. So again, it's on Power BI. These are screenshots. So on this one, it's not surprising that the main area everyone works on is the sales. Sales, purchasing, inventory, and finance, I'd say that's probably the core of everyone's business here. And then project management is the paid reserves. So we're using the project management side of the software for paid reserves. So that isn't a surprise. What is a surprise is that 2 people decided to have a play around with human resources over here on the side, and 6 on payment. I'm not sure what the payment is, but there are people kind of trying out different bits of the software. Page views. So this is going down to kind of the individual level of each page and which ones are the most popular. So unsurprisingly, again, sales orders, the biggest page. So that means to me, or that tells me that if I have to invest any resource in making a particular page more efficient or quicker, I should concentrate on sales orders, customer orders, sales order lists, kind of in that priority, because that's where people will get the most benefit from us doing that work. And again, if you scroll down the list, I don't think any of those are particularly surprising in terms of bits of the software that are most popular. That's a fun one, where people are that are using the software. I can account for most of those, but some of them are just a bit odd. I suspect some of them are kind of VPNs people are using, or people on holiday on the beach deciding to find out what sales were for yesterday or today. And there are quite a few people that have still got the US language triggered here over on the right-hand side of the screen, but most luckily are GB. Again, another one that's a bit of fun, how people are connecting. So Chrome, the most popular. Why the screen size would make that much of a difference, I'm not sure, but maybe that's the mobile app that people are using, which I think more people are using the mobile app than I thought, which is good, because I think people should, especially if I'm on holiday on the beach, you can get the mobile app working. Yeah, there you go. So the popular browsers there. So moving over to performance, so this is kind of a bit more hardcore in terms of what we really need the software to do and work. These are the areas that Andrea and his team will be looking at. So there's a dashboard, and this dashboard can be company, so an environment or a particular company, or across everyone. We can look at it both ways. And this is the one that's probably the most important to us, what are called long-running SQL queries. So that's the software trying to do something and it taking a bit longer than it should because something could be improved. So it doesn't mean there are 8,350 problems in the software, but drilling down into that number will give the developers an idea of where they need to concentrate and things that can be easily fixed to make things faster. And in fact, we did an exercise about 2 or 3 months ago, and we went into that and we improved the paid reserve process. So journaling a paid reserve, there were some tweaks we could make to that, which did make it faster, and this is the sort of thing that helped us do that. That's a detailed view. And that's the column that's kind of the interesting bit in terms of how long each action in the software takes. Again, looking at Shopify, there is quite a lot of overhead on Shopify in terms of processing, so it tends to do things in bulk, so there is quite a lot of overhead, and this tells us that. Web services, don't fully understand this screen, but the up and down charts are really nice. Times of day, times of year, when they're being run. And then over to the errors. So this is the sort of thing that support potentially could get involved in. What things are stopping you in the software from your workflow. Again, there's a dashboard giving us a bit of ideas. And then there's an example of errors that are not only caused by potentially, the Microsoft product or Bevica, but other add-ons. And we'd be quite interested in seeing if there are add-ons that are in the software that are stopping you from doing what you need to. That's Andrea. He doesn't like the presentation. On the debugging, so this kind of ties into that profiler, the sort of information that tells the developers which specific bits of code are being run, where they're being run from, and things that they need to pinpoint in terms of the kind of lines of code that need to be improved. And finally here on the administration and maintenance, this is about the upgrades, the releases we make, the bug fixes that we release. So this starts to tell us kind of the overview idea of what's happening to your environment. So here we can see if, for example, anyone's creating companies, deleting companies. When we apply hotfixes, we can see all of that. Those are all things that are all triggered. So that's the company deleting, company initializing, and so on. And retention policy is not something that we've worried about too much at the moment because everyone's on kind of a newish versions of the software. But Microsoft do charge you if your database gets over a certain size. So this retention policy is about being able to delete old data that you don't need anymore. So it might be summarizing data and storing it, or just deleting data. So this will be able to tell us who's got lots of data that could be deleted. And at the moment, again, because it's not particularly necessary, no one's really reached those limits, it's the change log. So there's almost 31 million change log records that have been deleted across everyone using Bevica. So that's probably just deleting companies or potentially tidying things up. Life cycle events. When, at the beginning of today, I mentioned that one of the improvements made by Microsoft are the keys or the indexes that they're making to the software. So this is one of the things that Microsoft have told us a lot more about how they're running the software. So from a performance point of view, the software tries to sort all the tables that you're looking at in a way that prepares it for the processes that you're going to run. So we can design some of those indexes ourselves, and the developers will do that depending on how we've designed the software. But sometimes those are missed, or sometimes there are better ways of sorting the software. So the Azure database in the background is continually trying to find better ways of sorting the software. And this is something kind of that Microsoft have shared with us a bit more than they used to. And these are here are examples of the software finding new indexes and applying them to your particular environment. So if someone does a particular process more than another customer, Azure will add that index to your environment, not to someone else's environment. So it's always looking at your particular environment, how you're using it, and which indexes it can improve to make your performance better. So the more processes you put through the software, the better it learns, and the better that it'll create these indexes here. And I think, yep. So with the Wave update that we're looking at the moment, this helps us plan who's on the latest version, who's being planned on the latest version. So Jack in the office will be sending out the emails and kind of cajoling you to do the testing and to get you upgraded. He can look at this and see what version you're currently on, what version we want you to be on, and when it's planned to go to that particular version. So you can see that across all of T-Vision, these are different things that we can look at from a global point of view to really kind of pinpoint areas that we can then contact you and get in touch. So really the summary is there's more things that you can do from a technical point of view to try and understand data and so on. Telemetry gives us lots of insights, and I'm sure we'll be sharing more in the future. And we plan to share some of your telemetry with you. So if you're interested in knowing about some of these screens that I showed you, we can provide those for your environment so you can see what's good, bad, and ugly. And Andrea will be doing a webinar in the future, so you'll get an email about that.